Then I got into studying it from an early church perspective. The view of hell as this place of eternal punishment was not a popular view at all.
What does this mean for us? What does this mean for us as humanity? What does this mean for us as Christians?
One of the worst things imaginable was to not have a proper burial.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nurse Adrienne, and I am on a journey myself to remembering who I am and inviting other people to join me. And this morning, we have the honor of talking to Logan Barone, who's a lot farther ahead than some of us on this journey. And Logan, I'm going to let you tell you about you. I've read a lot about you and I've participated in some of your events, but why don't you tell us, Logan's a best-selling author. He's a spiritual director, is on his LinkedIn, and I would love to hear more about how Logan would describe himself to people.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me on this podcast interview, whatever we call it. Um, it's an honor. And yeah, it's been great to get to know you over the past few months. And it's been really exciting to see everything you're doing with the book and with everything else you have going on. And it's been really, really awesome just to walk alongside you and to see that all unfold. So again, thank you for having me on. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Yeah, so I am an author, I'm a coach, I have a YouTube channel, and I post on social media pretty frequently. It's become my life, it's become my way to express my truest self, and it's been a pretty great ride so far. And it all started when I was really young. I mean, as far back as I can remember, I've been very interested in spiritual things and God and religion. I grew up Catholic, and then I was evangelical for a little while and became obsessed with the Bible when I was in high school and started getting into Bible studies and going to church a lot. And church was my whole world at that point in my life when I was in high school. And then by the time I was a senior, I decided I wanted to become a pastor. So I went into a pastoral internship and I was pretty much doing ministry nonstop at that point in my life and just giving myself more evidence as to why I'm supposed to be a pastor and teacher. And it just felt like every day I was in that world, my passion for all of that grew and grew more and more. So, um, I'm doing the pastoral internship. Then I start taking classes at Oral Roberts University, and I'm studying ministry, Christian theology, and of course, the Bible in depth, and just expanding my knowledge on the church and everything that comes with that. And so by the time I guess it was, I always forget. It was either freshman or sophomore year at ORU was when everything started to shift for me. I started to question a lot of the different things I had been taught growing up as a Catholic and then as an evangelical. So this started with different doctrines like the doctrine of hell, then original sin, then a lot of the eschatology stuff, the end time stuff. And the more I would question, the more I would almost have a little bit of doubt because um, I was so not used to questioning. You know, growing up, it was just here. This is the truth. Believe in this. Repeat this. Confess this, and you'll be good. But this was really the first time in my life where I was embodying curiosity and going outside the box that I had been in for so long. But I couldn't tell anyone I was doing this like secret deconstruction thing because I knew that if I told anyone that I was entertaining these different ideas and these different theological views, they would think that I was a heretic, right? And I was very afraid of that at the time. I didn't want to be the one that was going against the grain and stepping outside of the line, the system, whatever. So I just kind of kept my mouth shut and just pretended like I was believing all these other things when I was going back home. and then diving into these books and research and just absolutely diving into this as much as I could. And by the time I was a senior, I guess, in college, I was pretty much at a place where I didn't believe in hell anymore. That's where I was in my journey, which was a big deal. And it took, like I said, about 3 years of me studying this tremendously before I got to that point. But once I reached that point, I knew that everything else would start to crumble around because there's so many different doctrines that are kind of connected to that, especially when we
Hmm.
start getting into the fear-based doctrines. They're all kind of contingent on that. And so there was kind of like this domino effect that happened. And then I got to a place where I couldn't hold it in anymore. So I started sharing it with some people that I trusted. And that's when things got really difficult for me because, as I imagined going into it, once I would start to share and express my new beliefs and my new ideas around the theological matters, I knew I would receive a lot of pushback, and I did.
Hmm.
So, long story short, that led to me pretty much walking away from the church that I was a part of for uh, a while. And I lost a lot of friends, a lot of relationships that I had built over the
But don't
years.
worry, Logan, they're praying for you. Okay.
Oh yeah, don't believe me. I still get the messages today. Um, so after that, yeah, that's what really started my, I guess you could call it my public deconstruction journey, where now I'm sharing stuff on Facebook, and you know how it works. It's like once you
Yeah.
start actually sharing your heart and being authentic, God, the universe, source starts to send people your way that are in alignment
Mhm.
with you. And
Yeah.
before I knew it, I had people on Facebook that were saying things like, yeah, I've been through the same thing, or I know exactly what you're talking about, or yeah, that deeply resonates with me. And
Yeah.
that started to build momentum. That gave me some courage. So I started posting more. Eventually, that led to me writing some blogs and creating a website. And so then I was doing that. And then that grew a little bit, and more people started reading them. And then eventually, I guess after about a year of doing that, I was encouraged to write a book. And so I wrote the book because at that point I had so much material collected from just these different writings and blogs. And I said, yeah, I can probably write this book pretty quickly. So I did. I wrote the book in about 5 months, had it published. It's called The Mystery in You. And at that point in my journey, I would have considered myself to have been a Christian at that point, but a Christian that didn't believe in hell. So, like a Christian universalist or a
Hmm.
Christian mystic. And I was meditating and experiencing the divine within. So at the time, I was deeply, and I still am to this day, actually, but at the time, I was deeply inspired by Richard Rohr. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
No, I'm not, but
Yeah,
yeah.
he wrote a book called The Universal Christ, and it absolutely changed my life.
Hmm.
Anyway, after writing the book, I started to post more on social media. I started a YouTube channel and started at first sharing about the book and sharing just about different spiritual ideas that I had at the time. Still kind of underneath the Christian umbrella. I was still very much using that kind of language and focusing on that. But then eventually, as you're on the path and you keep questioning and you keep growing, you keep evolving, at some point, there's a time to go beyond that. At least for me, there was. And so when I went beyond the Christian umbrella, as I call it, I started studying some of the Eastern traditions, and I got into meditation and started studying consciousness and uh, many different things. And as I would learn about these things, gain knowledge on them, sit with them, meditate on them, I started receiving more insights and understandings. And eventually, I would make many videos about that. Um, and then the YouTube channel started to grow, and then eventually I got into coaching, and that kind of led me here.
Wow. That's quite the journey. And how many years was that roughly?
Um, from what point?
Probably from your junior year in
Oh,
college to now.
so that all started. It all started in like um 2020 or 2021.
Okay, so like a 5 year so far
Yeah,
journey. Yeah.
about four or 5 years. Yeah, but it feels like a few decades. It's crazy.
Yeah, I bet it does. That's a lot of stuff to pack in there. So
Yeah, and
it's
that was the very that was the version that went from one point to the next, but missed a lot of important details and stuff that I would be here for hours if I got into everything. But yeah, that's pretty much the sequence of what happened.
interesting. And so let's talk about really deconstructing hell alone. That alone kind of is such an underpinning, that fear based, I'm going to hell.
Yeah.
Um, I now laugh and say, well, all my friends will be there, so it won't be that bad. How bad will it be? My friends will all be there because we all are just as naughty as the other one. So, like, well, um, so I agree with that, but tell me like what principles you base that on, how the kind of unravel that a little bit for me, because I
Yeah.
think a lot of people need to hear that and understand that.
Hmm. For sure. Yeah. For me, the deconstruction of hell was basically focused on three different things. So I started with the Bible because at the time I still believed that the Bible was inerrant and completely divinely inspired and univocal and all these different things. So the only way I was going to change my mind about hell was
Mm-hmm.
if I could somehow discover that the Bible didn't teach that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I started. And I did get to a point where I realized that, hey, the Bible doesn't actually teach the modern version of hell that we find in much of mainstream Christianity today.
Mm-hmm.
It it's not really, there is, like I said, it's not univocal, meaning there's not this one voice or this one consistent message from Genesis to Revelation that talks about, this place in the afterlife of eternal conscious torment that's run by Satan. That just doesn't exist. So there's four words in the Bible that have been used to be translated to the English word hell in our English translations.
Mm-hmm.
And those four words are Sheol, which is the Hebrew word, then Hades, Greek, Gehenna, Greek, and then Tartarus, Greek. Um, and none of them mean a place in the afterlife of eternal conscious torment. And what's interesting is, in the Old Testament, um, when we read hell in the English translations in the Old Testament, it's that Hebrew word Sheol.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, Sheol was a place of the dead. It's where it was believed that all souls went there, and it was kind of like this shadowy existence. And then there was like different traditions and different ideas built around it over time, but basically it was like all souls went to Sheol, and then the righteous, maybe at some point in the future, when there would be the resurrection of the dead, which was believed to be a bodily resurrection, the righteous souls would rise from the dead and be in a body again, but then the unrighteous souls would just cease to exist. And that's like one of the main views of the afterlife that we find in the Old Testament. That's
Mm-hmm.
it. So, if anything, it points more to like annihilationism for the wicked, but we do not find this concept of hell in the case of eternal punishment at all in the Old Testament. Um,
In fact, there's no fire or burning in Sheol, right? Like
yeah,
they talk about this place where we will burn and yeah, fiery pit. So yeah, got it.
yeah. And it's also not a place that's separate from God, apparently, according to the Old Testament, because there's a psalm where I think David says something like, if I make my bed in Sheol, there you are, referring to God, you
Oh, so
know?
it's not vacant of God. It's not absent of God. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. And again, like just like any tradition, like over the years, there's going to be different understandings, different versions of it. But in the Old Testament, in Judaism at that time, like we don't find a version of hell that we find today in mainstream Christianity.
Right.
Then
Okay.
you get to the New Testament. Jesus predominantly uses this word Gehenna, Greek word Gehenna, which is referring to the valley of Hinnom.
Allegedly, he uses the word again.
Yeah, allegedly. Well, yeah, and that's in the Greek. If he, most people think he spoke Aramaic, but whatever we have in the four canonical gospels, which were written in Greek, is the word Gehenna. But yeah, we don't
Mhm.
even know if he actually said that or not, because these four gospels were written 40 to 70 years after he lived.
Yeah.
So, but if we're going by those gospels, if we're just
Yeah.
going to pretend like he said that, the word used when we read the English word hell in our English translations is Gehenna, which is referring to a real valley called the Valley of Hinnom, which was just outside of Jerusalem. And it was a place that had a horrible, um, there was something that happened in the Old Testament that was horrific at in this valley, and God cursed the valley because of that. And so it had this horrible reputation, this horrible like notion at the time, and to be thrown into Gehenna was something that would represent the
Okay.
destruction or death or judgment of the physical body, which remember, like at the time for a first century Jew, one of the worst things imaginable was to not have a proper burial. Because if you didn't have a proper burial, then
Oh,
something would happen to the body. It would be
so then when you
eaten
got
by.
resurrected, it meant you couldn't be resurrected into this proper
Exactly.
body. Oh, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Got it.
So that's why again there's different passages where apparently Jesus uses that word, but it's referring to real judgment and destruction of the body. That's the potential he's putting out there when he's using that. But again, it had nothing to do with this place of eternal conscious torment, um, and so on and so forth. Hades is used, but even that word, it's not used a whole lot. That comes from Greek mythology, and there's just again, there's nothing we can't see this univocal one understanding of hell like it seems there would be. Like the way I think about it is, okay, if this place hell is real
Hmm.
and this is a place that the unrighteous or unbelievers are going when they die, you would think that God would have mentioned this
Hmm.
in his book, in his Bible, like maybe on the first page, or at
Right.
least somewhere in the Old Testament in the first few books, but there's no mention of it at all. So I can go on and on and on with that, but that was the first thing, the studying it from a biblical perspective. Then I got into studying it from an early church perspective. And that's what really changed the game for me, because I discovered that for the first 4 to 5 centuries of the church, the view of hell as this place of eternal punishment was not a popular view at all. The One of the most popular views of the afterlife at the time was the view of universal restoration,
Okay.
or apokatastasis in the Greek, which was this idea that all souls would eventually be saved. And um, some of the different early church fathers and theologians had different ideas around that, like how that would happen. But essentially, the majority of them at the time in those first few centuries did not believe in eternal punishment. And even there's a quote by Augustine who even says that, something along the lines of, there's not a whole lot of people who believe in this eternal punishment right now, something like that.
Hmm.
So that really shocked me, because I was like, well, wait, why are there so many early church fathers and theologians, especially like in the second and third century, who don't believe in hell like so many Christians do today?
Hmm.
So that was another rabbit hole I went down that brought me more clarity and started to help me connect the dots. And then the last thing was just my own perspective from a philosophical standpoint, a theological standpoint, and just something along the lines of just logic and reason. And asking myself, is this the nature of a God who is apparently unconditional love to send people to a place of eternal conscious torment because they believed in the wrong thing,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then that led to so many more questions. And again, you can sit there and think about a lot of different perspectives there. But those were the three main things that I spent really, like I said, 3 years on navigating, questioning, studying. And I have forgotten most of the little details and specifics and names because it's been a few years. But um, yeah, that was kind of my journey with hell, my journey out of hell.
Journey out of hell, exactly, literally.
Yeah.
Um, so, and then our friend Satan, um, that is another whole rabbit hole you could probably go down and describe why that is not real. But how about telling me, so what does this mean for us? What does this mean for us as humanity? What does this mean for us as Christians? I think, or my own journey, when I started to unravel Christianity, I never went to the place where I hear a lot of people say, well, why be good if you're not going to hell? And like, well, why not be good?
Yeah,
Do
right.
I have to be threatened to be good?
Right.
And what is good also? What is good? We have a lot of ideas about what that is.
Hmm.
And what does that mean for prayer? We've always been taught to pray to this external God. So, Logan, what does that mean? Because I think in my own journey, I felt really lost and actually a little bit afraid for a while. I lost friends. I didn't know how to make friends anymore because I always made them through church connections. Um, I didn't know, there's just a lot. What if I'm wrong? So what does it kind of mean for us as Christians, or as just as human beings more than just Christians, but that in between space? Help us navigate that a little bit.
Yeah, I think what it means is that we don't have to take life so seriously. I know for myself, when I was believing in that, for myself potentially, and then for other people, I spent so much of my time trying to convince so many people to believe in the same theology as I believed in, thinking that everyone I met was destined for hell unless they repented, unless they got saved, unless they believed like me. And that is a very strenuous way to live that leads to exhaustion. And for me, it led to a lot of inauthenticity. So, for me at least, I can't speak for everyone else, but for me, what it meant was the ability to live in this world, to have this human experience, and actually experience freedom, heaven, peace, joy, bliss, unconditional love right here, right now, without this pressure of I have to lead all these people into the one and only religion.
Hmm.
And for me, I think what helped me start to live like that was obviously the unlearning that I did, the deconstruction that cleared the clouds to where I could see what was actually going on. But then the other thing was studying all these different traditions and meeting people from these traditions who were full of what I would call the divine or unconditional love or this level of consciousness that was rooted in unity instead of separation. And I'm like,
Hmm.
how in the world can we say that these people or people who don't believe in God at all, atheists who are some of the most, I've met atheists who are some of the most loving people I've met, the most caring and kind and compassionate people I've met. And I'm like, again, going back to the whole logic and reasoning thing, like, how in the world can we actually say that these people are going to hell? Or what about the people who are not born into the religion of Christianity and they're born in different parts of the world where they never hear about anything related to the Bible or Christianity or Jesus? Well, they'll have a chance. And you come up, you see that there's just always a solution. And to me, like when there's always a quick answer to every question, that's a major red flag.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, once I started to let go of that and I started to live freely, like I said, life just became a lot more enjoyable. I started to have fun more, and I started to experience God more within myself and within everyone and everything. And I would say it's truly the shift from living in fear to living in love.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, well, then who do we pray to? Who's going to answer our prayers?
I've been trying to figure that out for 4 years now. I've been talking to the ceiling.
That was my
Yeah,
biggest hurdle. I'm like, well, who's going to answer my prayers now? Like, I just.
yeah, I know. Well, the good news, the gospel, is that it's not this like old judge in the sky with this white hair and a white beard who's gonna send the majority of the population to hell. It's not that guy. It's not the big man upstairs.
Okay, good.
One of the things that happened when I went through my dark night of the soul was I really got into meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got into meditation, that was the first time I started going within. And we've heard people talk about that, especially the mystical people, the sages, the saints. They talk about going within. Even Jesus said, "The kingdom of heaven is within you." And I would read that growing up, but I never really knew what it meant. Or some
Mm-hmm.
translations didn't even say within you. It said in your midst or among you or something like that. So to me, that was, I was confused about that. But then when I started meditating, I started to directly experience the kingdom within, the divine within, the Christ within.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time when I first started experiencing that, I didn't call it the Christ. I didn't call it even God or the kingdom of heaven. What I called it, because of my experience and the best words I had at the time, were just unconditional love, but being experienced from within me,
Mm-hmm.
not outside of me. And from those moments, from those experiences, I started to trust in the God, the unconditional love within me.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of asking this deity up in the heavens somewhere to answer all my prayers or to help me to make an A on a test or to help me to find a parking spot, I let go of that because to me that's separation consciousness. And I started focusing on what I had discovered within me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I could even go into my imagination or go into deep meditation and almost imagine like this radiance or these vibrational frequencies coming from the depths of my being, going into a situation or circumstance, or if it was like healing for a person, whatever. And I found that prayer became something that was much more personal and had so much more to do with my union with God instead of separation and begging and asking God to do all these things. And I wrote about this in my book. Like, I just got so tired of this whole notion of God and prayer where it's like, and I've seen athletes, this happens a lot with athletes where it's like they'll hit a game winning shot. I did this growing up as an athlete. They'll hit the game winning shot or the touchdown or the goal, whatever. And then they're like getting interviewed after the game and they're like, how were you able to do this? Where did this come from? And they say, oh, it was God or it was Jesus. Jesus showed up. Jesus gave me the strength. Jesus enabled me to make this game winning free throw. And I'm like, wait, pause. You mean to tell me that God or Jesus shows up to help us make game winning free throws, but he's MIA when it comes to these horrible car accidents or these
Right.
disasters or these diseases? Like, where is the big man upstairs when those things happen?
Right. Yeah. I think that too. When they say, oh, you know, uh, this tragedy happened and God protected me, but he didn't protect all the people around me. I agree with you. I agree.
Yeah.
It's so interesting that he would pick and choose. This all loving God would pick and choose. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, that just became just fantasy. That became something that fiction, like um I stopped believing in that, and I started to almost like combine, like I said, meditation with prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I started noticing the most amount of changes in my life and in the lives of others. And it was just different. It was totally different. But like I said, it was coming from a place of oneness instead of from a place of separation.
Got it. Got it. Interesting.
Yeah.
And so, and tell me more about what type of meditation. There's so many types of meditation, and
Yeah.
um, there's sitting on a mountaintop meditation,
Hmm.
and so tell me more about how you learn to meditate. I still really struggle with meditation in some ways, and I don't know why. Why, whatever. I would love to hear more about how you taught yourself, where you learned, what led you down that path.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So like I said, during my dark night of the soul, when I was deconstructing and I was leaving the church, that's when I started to go within. And at the time, I was reading a lot of the different Christian mystics, and they were talking about things like meditation or contemplative prayer. And so I guess that's how I got started. That's who I originally learned from. And for me, it was just a matter of, I think, bringing awareness to these parts of myself that I had not brought awareness to. And I started very simple. I didn't have a specific meditation I was doing. I would just sit in a chair and I would just start focusing on my breath. And I wasn't even doing any kind of specific, like fancy breath work technique. I was literally just observing the natural rise and fall of my breath. And eventually, what would happen was I would notice these like distracting thoughts that I would typically have in the beginning of meditation. Those thoughts would dissipate the more I would focus on my breath. And sometimes I was listening to some kind of meditation music, sometimes I wasn't. But the more I would do that, the more my brain waves would slow down and I would move from my headspace into my heart space. Then I would start to feel different things like these elevated emotions like peace and love and joy. Sometimes there would be moments of like darkness or anger or sadness that I'd have to work through and allow my body to feel and allow the energy to move through me, which was still done by me staying focused and centered on my breath and allowing that to do whatever it was going to do. And
Mm-hmm.
I use a lot of analogies. So I always go back to clouds. I love referring to the clouds and using that as for different analogies, but it's like
Mm-hmm.
these different emotions would come up, which to me, those emotions were repressed feelings or suppressed feelings. And now that I was actually getting still enough to experience them and to see them, they were able to move through me. And that's the clouds that are moving and dissipating and fading out. And then underneath the clouds, I was able to start to directly experience this like joy that was incomprehensible and this
Mm-hmm.
peace that surpasses all understanding, which to me at the time was my true divine nature starting to shine. It was the light of the world that Jesus actually talks about shining forth. And, it took some time. Like those moments, those mystical experiences didn't happen right away,
Mm-hmm.
but it just started with simply sitting there, following my breath, training myself to be still and slow down a little bit. And then I started studying, like I said, some of the Eastern traditions, and that's when I started learning some different techniques. But I never got to a place where I said, "Oh, I'm just going to do this specific kind of meditation because this is the best way to meditate."
Right.
No, because for me, meditation has always been something very personal
Mm-hmm.
and very intimate. And to me, it's going to look different for each person.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I always tried to cultivate that. And the more I would cultivate that, the more I would be led into these deeper experiences and moments in meditation. And now
Mm-hmm.
the way I view meditation is, there was a time when I first started where I was so focused on the practice of meditation itself. I thought that's what it was all about. It was all about the practice and getting into these moments of transcendence, these mystical experiences where there would be healings and visions and crazy encounters with different beings or whatever. Um, but after having a few of those experiences, I was like, these are good, but they're not
Mhm.
really transformative in the sense of
Yeah,
like, they weren't really carrying over into my everyday life,
got it.
you know? But when I shifted my focus from viewing meditation as something that I was practicing to have a mystical experience to what I now call training for life, that's when it did start to carry over. And now I say things like, I'm meditating all the time.
Mm.
Meditation became, and I still do the practice, but when I do the practice, it's not long at all. It's like 5 to 10 minutes. It's really
Mhm.
short, but it's my grounding. It's what's
Mhm.
training again my mind, my awareness to be in the present moment and to respond with love and clarity instead of
Mhm.
reacting from the ego and fear when shit comes up in life.
Right. Yeah.
And that's been tremendous for me. And yeah.
I love that you say that because I think even for myself, I started to make meditation the new religion. I
Hmm.
had to meditate so much time, and if I didn't reach this certain feeling during meditation, then it was a failure. And I started picking apart my meditation even. And
Yeah.
so I love that you say that because I'm finding that I've changed a tremendous amount. Um, and I find that sometimes I'm meditating, just because I feel that tension rising in my body. And if I just take 2 minutes and breathe, I just exhale. My friend John always says exhale. It really, and there's a lot of science behind it too. There's science
Yeah.
behind slowing your thoughts down. There's science behind when you're looking for things, you'll find them in the amygdala. There's science behind exhaling as opposed to inhaling. So there's a lot of science, which fascinates my nurse brain. So
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. No,
yeah.
I definitely have spent some time looking into the neuroscience and stuff like that, which has helped me kind of make sense of what my brain's going through with the different brain waves and stuff like pineal gland activation. And it's really interesting stuff.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's fascinating. And that's also, I think, what helped me a lot was a lot of mysticism is actually based in science.
Yeah.
Um, it's not based in fear. It's not based in, the total theology. There's so much science behind it. And, and India has been a great leader in science for a lot of things that our country has taken credit for. Other countries have taken credit for, but India was doing it a long time ago. So fascinating too.
Yeah.
To recognize that as you study, as you learn, as you get out of this ethnocentric culture that we kind of live in, that we've created for ourselves, it really does make
Yeah.
the world a bigger, more beautiful place. I agree.
Yeah. Totally.
So what are your and we'll start to wrap it up because I know you have to go. I really appreciate all your time this morning.
Yeah.
What are your recommendations for people? If you had to recommend one book or one thing to do to start people on their journey, what would it be?
Um, Before any books or any new teachings or philosophies or whatever, I would recommend a season of actually getting away from most of that and a season of stillness and like simplicity, spending more time in nature, spending more time in meditation and getting really honest with yourself and really evaluating like what you believe and why. And then from that place, you can ask more questions and you can start to really dissolve these different things that you come to find out, hey, wait a second, I don't actually believe this, or this was something that was told to me and I had to accept it because I was afraid that I'd go to hell or whatever if I didn't accept it. So I think a season of curiosity, simplicity, honesty, and stillness is always going to be the precursor to the season of relearning, reprogramming, and actually being in a space where your consciousness can expand with this new insightful information. So I definitely recommend that. And then when the time comes, I think what happens in the season of rest and stillness that I just mentioned is you start to really develop intuition. And so you have this inner authority, this inner guidance that you now allow to guide you instead of just listening to what all these other people are saying and telling you to do. Now you're being led by your intuition, and your intuition will
Mhm.
always lead you into the right book or the right teacher or coach or YouTube channel, whatever it is, whatever you need to learn, whatever you need to read and understand, your intuition will guide you into that. So
I
that's
love
my
that.
recommendation.
I love
Yeah.
that. I think that for myself, I will commit to working with a coach for 1 year. And if and so far at the end of that year, I've always thought, well, I'm going to find someone new. And not because I'm dissatisfied with the person. I think it's very different, but because
Yeah.
I think, what's the next thing I need to learn? And if we kind of latch on to someone and their ideals so much, we're doing the exact same thing we did with religion. And so,
Yeah.
kind of, that's good advice. Also, finding out what you need to learn is another thing I hear you saying. So what is it you need to learn? And that coach will kind of bubble up for you, or that book, those things
Yeah.
will bubble up for you. So well, thank you so
Totally.
much. Thank you everyone for listening to this interview. And I would say if you look down in the comments, in the description, you will find all the links to Logan's book, to Logan's social media platforms. Please follow him. I think he has a great deal to teach us and show us, and we can lean into the studying. I myself am not a big studier, so I appreciate people like
Mhm.
Logan who do deep dives into the meanings of words and understanding history and applying it and kind of pulling that apart for us. So, and he can also direct you to how to do that if you like doing that kind of thing. He has a website that will be down in the comments. His book link will be down in the comments. So I want to thank you again, Logan, for all your time. And I
Yeah.
appreciate all you shared with us this morning. Follow Logan for more information, and good luck deconstructing your religion. Thank you so much.